Flames ripped through 50 acres of golden wheat, devouring William Reed's lifework in minutes. 3 masked men laughed as the old farmer desperately fought the blaze with a garden hose, collapsing to his knees in choking smoke. Next time, "It's your house, old man," their leader shouted over the roaring inferno. "Nobody refuses Caldwell twice." William's weathered hands trembled as he watched 60 years of hard work turn to ash. They'd broken his fences, poisoned his cattle, and now this, but they'd miscalculated badly. They didn't know about his son. 6,000 miles away, Sergeant Major Jack Reed stood covered in desert dust and blood not his own, checking his team's handiwork, another high-value target eliminated. His satellite phone vibrated. The voice on the other end was grim. "Jack, it's about your father." His face hardened into something his enemies had learned to fear. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The Black Hawk helicopter thundered through the Afghan night, rotors slicing darkness as Jack Reed finished wiping blood from his custom combat knife. Below them, a terrorist compound smoldered, another mission completed with the surgical precision that had made his team legendary within special operations circles. 3 HVTs eliminated, 0 civilian casualties. "Extraction complete," Jack reported into his headset. "Mission accomplished." His second-in-command, Rodriguez, nodded with grim satisfaction. They'd been hunting this cell for months, and now the architects of 3 embassy bombings would never plan another attack. Jack's 10-man team sat in silence, each man processing the night's violence in his own way. None of them were strangers to death, dealing it or brushing against it themselves. "Sergeant Major," the pilot called back, "Command has an urgent message." Jack frowned. Mid-extraction communications were unusual. He took the satellite phone, his body tensing instinctively. "Reed here. Jack, it's about your father." The voice belonged to Colonel Winters, his direct superior, and one of the few people who knew anything about Jack's personal life. "William's in the hospital. His farm was attacked, crops burned. He's in critical condition." Jack's knuckles whitened around. The phone. 15 years of special operations had taught him to control his emotions, to compartmentalize. But this was different. "What happened?" "Local sheriff says it looks like arson. Development companies been pressuring farmers to sell. Your father refused." Images flashed unbidden, golden wheat fields stretching to the horizon. His father's calloused hands, the weathered farmhouse where he'd grown up. A place he'd left behind 18 years ago after that final explosive argument. "I need to get back," Jack said simply. "Already arranged. There's a transport waiting at base. You've got 30 days emergency leave. Use it." Jack hung up, his mind already calculating distances, timelines, and what he would need. Rodriguez caught his eye, recognizing the look. "Trouble at home, boss?" "My father's been attacked. Farm's been burned." Rodriguez nodded, asking no further questions. In their line of work, personal histories remained largely private, but they all knew Jack had grown up on a farm in Montana, a fact that had earned him the occasional good-natured ribbing about being a country boy. "Anything we can do?" Rodriguez asked. Jack shook his head. "Not yet." The helicopter landed at their forward operating base, and Jack moved with purpose. Within an hour he had briefed his second-in-command on ongoing operations, packed his few personal belongings, and changed into civilian clothes, jeans, boots, and a plain button-down shirt that did little to disguise the coiled strength of his frame. Colonel Winters met him at the airfield, concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "Jack, I've seen that look before. Whatever you're thinking, I'm just going to check on my father," Jack interrupted, voice deliberately neutral. Winters sighed. "These developers, Caldwell Industries, they've got connections, political protection. Just remember you're still U.S. military. Jack's expression remained unreadable. "Understood, sir." "I mean it, Reed. I need my best operator back in one piece, preferably without an investigation trailing behind him." Jack shouldered his bag. "I appreciate the concern." Colonel Winters knew better than to push further. Jack Reed had spent 2 decades becoming a weapon, honed through multiple combat tours and the military's most demanding special operations training. He was the man they sent when failure wasn't an option. Calm under pressure, lethal when necessary, and utterly relentless. The C-17 transport roared through the night, and Jack closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, memories surfaced, arguing with his father about enlisting, William's furious words, "You're abandoning the land that's been in our family for generations." His own angry retort, "There's more to life than dirt and wheat." The way they'd both been too stubborn to reach out over the years, their rare conversations stiff and formal. 18 hours and 3 flights later, Jack rented a truck at the Billings airport. The Montana landscape unfurled before him. Vast. Skies, rolling plains, distant mountains. It should have felt like coming home, but too much time had passed. Too many things had changed, himself most of all. Pine Creek had changed too. The small, rural town of his youth had expanded outward, new construction visible on its outskirts. Luxury homes now stood where family farms had once operated. Glossy signs advertised Caldwell Estates and Mountain View Development. Jack drove past the town centre, noting the new coffee shop and wine bar that seemed strangely out of place amid the feed store and hardware shop. He pulled into the hospital parking lot, a small regional facility that handled everything from farm accidents to births. Inside, the antiseptic smell hit him immediately, so different from the metallic scent of blood and gunpowder he'd become accustomed to. At the front desk, he straightened, consciously adjusting his posture to appear less intimidating. "William Reed's room, please." "I'm his son." The nurse looked up, recognition dawning. "Jack Reed? Oh my, you've been gone so long. Your poor father." "He's in room 212. Dr. Miller is with him now." Jack nodded his thanks, already moving toward the elevator, his stride purposeful. Whatever waited in that hospital room, whoever had put his father there, they had no idea what was coming for them. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. William Reed looked small in the bed, oxygen tubes in his nostrils, his weathered face pale against white sheets. Deep lines etched his features, more than Jack remembered, the years having carved their passage across his father's once strong countenance. Seeing him this way, vulnerable, diminished, struck Jack with unexpected force. This was the man who had once seemed indestructible, who could work from dawn until dusk without complaint, who had taught him how to drive a tractor at age 8 and shoot a rifle at 10. "Dad," Jack said softly, moving to the bedside. Williams, eyes fluttered open, cloudy with medication. Recognition dawned slowly, disbelief crossing his features. "Jack, you're really here?" His voice was raspy, weakened by smoke inhalation. "I'm here." Jack pulled a chair close. The distance between them measured in more than just inches. 18 years of silence and stubborn pride stretched between father and son. "Shouldn't have bothered you," William muttered. "Just some trouble with the farm." Before Jack could respond, the door opened. A man in his 40s with a sheriff's badge entered, stopping short when he saw Jack. "Well, I'll be damned." Jack Reed in the flesh. He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Don't know if you remember me. Tommy Cooper. We played baseball together in high school." Jack stood, shaking, the offered hand. "Sheriff now, I see. Going on 8 years. Cooper studied him. "Heard you went military, special forces from the looks of you." Jack neither confirmed nor denied, turning the conversation. "What happened to my father?" Cooper's expression darkened. "Arson, plain and simple. 3 men poured accelerant on the eastern wheat field and lit it up. Your father tried to stop them, breathed in too much smoke. Neighbor called it in when she saw the flames. Did you catch them? Not yet, but we know who's behind. It. Cooper glanced at William. Your father's not the only one they've targeted. 5 farms burned in the last 3 months, all owned by people who refused to sell to Caldwell Industries. William coughed, struggling to sit up. They won't get my land. I don't care what they do. Jack placed a steadying hand on his father's shoulder, feeling the bones beneath the hospital gown. Who's Caldwell? Preston Caldwell, Cooper explained. Moved in about 5 years ago. Started buying up properties, building luxury homes and resorts. Wants to turn Pine Creek into the next Aspen. Those who sell get good money. Those who don't. He gestured toward William's bed. And you haven't arrested anyone? Cooper's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. Caldwell's men are careful. No evidence, no witnesses willing to testify. And Caldwell himself has the county commissioners and half the state politicians in his pocket. A light knock at the door interrupted them. A woman entered, blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a clinic jacket with a veterinary logo. She stopped when she saw Jack, eyes widening in recognition. Jack Reed, you actually came. Her voice held surprise and something else, wariness perhaps. It took him a moment to place her. Emma Sullivan? She nodded, moving to William's bedside, with the ease of familiarity. How are you feeling today, William? Better now that my son's here, William replied, a hint of his old stubbornness returning. Jack's going to sort this mess out. Emma glanced at Jack, skepticism clear in her green eyes. Is that so? Jack studied her. Emma Sullivan, the veterinarian's daughter who'd lived on the neighboring farm. They'd gone to school together, even dated briefly during senior year before he'd enlisted and left everything behind. She'd grown into her features, the awkward teenager, now a confident woman. Emma's been helping me keep the place running, William explained. Checks on me every day, brings groceries. And how exactly are you planning to sort this out? Emma asked, direct as ever. Before Jack could answer, William coughed violently, his body spasming. Emma quickly adjusted his oxygen, her movements practiced and efficient. He needs rest, she told Jack firmly. The doctor says he can go home tomorrow if his levels improve, but he'll need supervision. I'll take care of him, Jack said. Emma's expression suggested doubt, but she didn't challenge. Him. Sheriff, can I speak with you outside? Cooper nodded, following her into the hallway. Jack could read their body language through the window, Emma gesturing emphatically, Cooper's defensive posture. They were arguing about something, likely. About his father's case. She's got fire, that one, William murmured, following Jack's gaze. Reminds me of your mother sometimes. The mention of his mother, dead 16 years now, created another pang of regret. Jack hadn't been there when cancer took her. His deployment to Afghanistan, making it impossible to return in time. Another fracture in his relationship with his father. What's really going on here, Dad? Why's Caldwell so determined to get your land specifically? William's eyes drifted to the window. It's not just me. It's all the farms along Silver Creek. He's building some resort complex, needs water rights. Our land controls key access. And you wouldn't sell. Would you sell your mother's resting place? William's voice sharpened. She's buried on that hill overlooking the East Meadow, just like she wanted. No amount of money could make me give that up. Jack hadn't known. His mother's funeral had been brief during his first deployment. He'd gotten compassionate leave but had to return immediately after the service. He hadn't realized she was buried on the farm itself. The door opened again, and Emma returned alone. Sheriff's got a call, she explained. Jack, can we talk? Outside. He followed her to a small waiting area, empty except for them. Up close, he could see the dusting of freckles across her nose, the same ones she'd had as a teenager. Your father's being stubborn, she said without preamble. He won't leave the farm even temporarily. I've offered my guest room, but he refuses. Sounds. Like him. These people, Caldwell's men, they're dangerous. The Hobson place was burned 3 weeks ago. Then Miller's barn. Now your father's wheat. They're escalating. Has anyone been hurt besides my father? Emma hesitated. Tom Hobson's dog was shot. Mrs. Miller was shoved when she confronted them. But this is the first time someone's been hospitalized. Jack processed this, his tactical mind already calculating scenarios, vulnerabilities, response options. Cooper's a good man, Emma continued, but he's outgunned and outmanned. Caldwell has a small army of these thugs, ex-cons, mercenary types. They drive black SUVs, wear matched jackets, like some kind of private security force. How many? At least a dozen I've seen personally. Probably more. Jack nodded, committing this to memory. Why are you helping my father? You were never particularly close with our family. Emma's eyes flashed. Because it's the right thing to do. Because what's happening here is wrong. And because your father, for all his stubbornness, is a good man who doesn't deserve this. She studied him, taking in the changes 18 years had wrought, the hardened physique, the watchful eyes, the economical movements that suggested dangerous capability. What exactly do you do in the military, Jack? That's classified. Of course it is, she shook her head. Look, I don't know what you're thinking, but this isn't some war zone. You can't just eliminate the opposition. These are civilian matters that need legal solutions. Jack's expression remained neutral. I understand the difference. Emma didn't look convinced. Your father needs someone to help him recover and protect the farm. If that's not something you can do within the law, you should leave now before you make things worse. With that parting shot, she turned and walked back to William's room, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. She didn't understand what he was truly capable of. Few civilians did. But she was right about one thing. This wasn't a war zone, not yet anyway. The acrid smell of burned crops hit Jack like a physical force as he drove up the winding dirt road to the Reed farm. What should have been acres of golden wheat was now a blackened wasteland. The farmhouse stood untouched on the hill, a century old. Structure that had witnessed 4 generations of Reeds working this land. Jack walked the perimeter of the burned field, reading the ground like a book. 3 sets of footprints, tire tracks from a heavy vehicle, cigarette butts discarded carelessly. Inside the house, everything was frozen in time. His mother's quilts folded neatly over the couch, family photos on the mantel, including his high school graduation picture. The kitchen showed Emma's influence. Fresh groceries in the refrigerator, medications arranged neatly on the counter. Sheriff Cooper arrived with Deputy Martinez to check for evidence. Problem is, Cooper said finally, this still doesn't give us enough to move on Caldwell directly. These guys are hired muscle. They'll take the fall while he claims no knowledge. A black SUV approached. 3 men emerged, led by a bald man with sleeve tattoos. Afternoon, Sheriff, the man called mockingly. Just checking on Old Man Reed's property. Heard there was a fire. Real tragic. This is private property, Deacon, Cooper replied. You need to leave. Deacon turned to Jack. You must be the son. Heard you were military. Word of advice? This isn't your fight. Your daddy should have taken the money. He stepped closer. Accidents happen all the time around here. Would be a shame if the old man had another accident. Jack moved with lightning speed, disarming Deacon in one fluid motion. That was your first mistake, Jack said quietly. Here's some advice in return. Walk away, because if anything happens to my father or this farm, I will hold you personally responsible. After a tense standoff, Caldwell's men retreated. Emma arrived shortly after. William's being discharged early. He won't stop demanding to come home. At the hospital, William gripped Jack's wrist with surprising strength. The land, there's more at stake than just the farm. Your mother, she made me promise to keep it in the family. There's something you need to see when we get home. The East Meadow, the old oak. Promise me, Jack. promise you won't let Caldwell take our land." Looking into his father's desperate eyes, Jack felt something shift inside him. "I promise," he said quietly. "No one's taking the farm." Jack called Colonel Winters to extend his leave. "I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with," he told Emma later. "Caldwell, his operation, his men, everything you know." Emma nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this my way, legally, or I go straight to Sheriff Cooper." "Agreed," Jack said, though they both recognized the ambiguity in his response. Caldwell had brought violence to his family's doorstep, threatened his ailing father, and tried to steal land that held his mother's remains. The incursion that had begun with burned crops would end very differently than Caldwell anticipated. Jack would make sure of that. Dawn broke over the Reed farm, illuminating both the charred wasteland of the wheat field and the untouched pastures beyond. Jack stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the landscape he'd once known intimately. The quiet was profound after years of military bases and combat zones. Emma's pickup approached right on schedule to help bring William home. She carried her veterinary bag and groceries, moving with practical confidence across the yard. "You sleep at all?" she called. "Enough." "Williams, discharge is at 9. We should head out soon." Inside, Jack had already prepared for his father's return, setting up the downstairs bedroom and organizing medications. Emma looked impressed. "Military precision comes in handy sometimes, I guess." "Basic skills," Jack replied methodically. "Unpacking groceries. You've changed," Emma observed. "The Jack Reed I remember was more reckless. I was going to say impulsive. You used to jump first, think later." "That version of me wouldn't have survived what I've been through," Jack said simply. During the drive to the hospital, Emma pointed out Caldwell's modern office building. "That's where he runs everything, all legitimate on paper." Jack noted the security features. "How many men does he have?" "At least 20. Some are just thugs, but others move like you do. Military training." William was waiting impatiently at the hospital, already dressed. His face lit up at the sight of his son, surprising Jack. "About time," William grumbled without heat. "These nurses keep trying to make me eat pudding." In the truck driving home, William explained Caldwell's operation. "Started buying properties at fair prices. Then he announced this massive resort development. Needed water rights, which meant he needed the farms along Silver Creek, our creek," Jack remembered. "Controls irrigation for the entire valley. His resort needs golf courses, swimming pools, means diverting the water that feeds our fields." "But you wouldn't sell?" William looked directly at his son. "Your mother is buried on that land, Jack, East Meadow under the old oak. Her favorite spot. She made me promise I'd keep it in the family." As they approached the farm, they spotted a new sign at the boundary. "Future home of Caldwell Estates. Luxury homes coming soon." Jack pulled over, exited the truck, and methodically removed the sign, concrete footing and all. He stored it in the truck bed and continued driving as if nothing had happened. "That's probably illegal," Emma pointed out. "It was on our property." "No, it wasn't. The county owns the easement along the road. Then the county can come ask for their sign back." After dinner, William insisted on showing Jack his mother's grave, despite his weakened condition. They walked slowly to the East Meadow, where a simple stone marker lay beneath a massive oak tree. "Margaret Ann Reed, beloved wife and mother. Her spirit lives in this land. She made me promise to keep this land in the family," William said softly. 4 generations, Jack." Jack knelt beside the marker. "I should have been here." "You were where she knew you needed to be," William replied. He pointed to a small metal container embedded in the tree trunk. "Your mother's final gift to you." Jack opened it and found a sealed letter addressed, "For Jack, when he's ready." "She wrote it the week before she died," William explained. That night, after his father was asleep, Jack read his mother's final words. She wrote of her pride in his service, her understanding of why he'd left, and her hope that someday he would reconnect with his father. "Protect what matters, Jack," she'd written. "Not just the land, but the connections between people who love each other. That's the only legacy that truly endures." Tomorrow his teammates would arrive, the work would begin. But tonight, Jack allowed himself to feel the full weight of homecoming. The rental car crunched up the gravel driveway at precisely 0700 hours. Jack watched from the porch as Rodriguez and Chen stepped out, both in casual clothing that couldn't quite disguise their military bearing. Miguel Rodriguez was tall, with broad shoulders and the compact build of someone who could lift twice his body weight. David Chen was smaller, wiry and precise in his movements, with an unassuming presence that let him blend into almost any environment. Jack met them with firm handshakes that conveyed more than words. "Nice place," Rodriguez said, surveying the farm. "Bigger than I expected." 300 acres, Jack confirmed, half-tillable rest pasture and woods. Chen was already examining the burned field. Deliberate pattern to the burn, started at 3 points to ensure maximum coverage. He knelt, testing the soil. Accelerant residue still detectable. Amateur work, but effective. "Situation report?" Rodriguez asked as they moved toward the house. "Farms vulnerable on all sides. Main access road from the east, service road to the north, creek boundary to the west. Caldwell has men conducting regular surveillance." William waited on the porch, standing straighter than his health probably allowed. Jack performed the introductions. "Your son saved our lives more times than I can count," Rodriguez told William, accepting the offered handshake. Inside, Chen immediately set up his equipment: laptop, satellite uplink, and various monitoring devices. Rodriguez distributed gear from his duffel bag: encrypted communication devices, surveillance tools, and non-lethal defensive options. "Brought the basics," he explained to Jack. "If we need more, I have contacts." William watched them transform, his kitchen into an operations center with a mixture of fascination and concern. "You boys planning for World War III? "Just insurance," Jack assured him. "Basic security measures." Chen's fingers flew across his keyboard. "I've got satellite imagery of the area for the past 6 months. Shows the progression of Caldwell's development and the farms he's acquired." He pointed to a pattern forming around Silver Creek. "He's systematically securing water access." "What about his security team?" Jack asked. Chen pulled up personnel files. "Ex-military and former corrections officers. Leader is Michael Deacon. Dishonorable discharge from Army Rangers. History of excessive force complaints. Now head of Caldwell. Security Services." "I met him," Jack said. "Overconfident. Sloppy technique." Rodriguez examined the property maps. "We should establish a perimeter monitoring system, motion sensors, cameras, early warning." "Legally?" Emma asked from the doorway, startling them. Jack hadn't heard her arrive. She stood with arms crossed, veterinary bag over her shoulder, clearly unhappy about the military presence. "Just home security," Jack explained. "Nothing illegal." "Right." Her skepticism was evident. "And these are just old friends visiting?" Jack performed introductions. Emma acknowledged them coolly. "Ms. Sullivan's been helping my father," Jack explained. "She knows the situation." "I know that 3 ex-military operators setting up surveillance equipment might escalate things," Emma countered. "Sheriff Cooper's already asking questions about yesterday's sign removal." "She has a point," Chen said. "Local law enforcement could complicate our operation." Emma's eyes narrowed. "This isn't an operation. This is William's farm." "It's both now," Jack said quietly. "Caldwell made it that way." William spoke up from his chair. "Emma, these men are here to help. I trust my son's judgment." She didn't look convinced, but softened at William's words. "I need to check your vitals and change that dressing." She moved to William's side, her professional demeanor taking over. While Emma attended to William, Jack led his team outside for a property tour. They walked the perimeter, Rodriguez and Chen assessing terrain and security vulnerabilities, with practiced eyes. Creek provides good natural boundary, Rodriguez noted, but also access if someone's determined. The high ground by the oak tree gives excellent sightlines, Chen added, perfect for surveillance. Jack pointed to the neighboring properties. Hobson's farm to the north was burned out 3 weeks ago. They sold to Caldwell. Miller's place to the south is still holding out. We should coordinate with them, Rodriguez suggested. Form a mutual defense network. They continued their assessment, speaking in the shorthand of men who had conducted countless operations together. By the time they returned to the house, they had a preliminary security plan. Emma was leaving, medical bag packed. William needs rest, she told Jack firmly. No excitement, no stress. Understood. She hesitated. My clinic was vandalized again, last night. Final warning, spray-painted on the door. Jack's expression hardened. When were you going to mention this? I'm mentioning it now. She held his gaze. They're escalating because of you, Jack, because you confronted them. Or because they were always going to escalate, he countered. That's how intimidation works. Before Emma could respond, Sheriff Cooper's cruiser appeared on the road heading toward the farm. Company, Rodriguez murmured. Stay inside, Jack told his team. Let me handle this. Cooper parked beside Emma's truck and approached cautiously, noting Jack's alertness. Morning read, Ms. Sullivan. Sheriff, they acknowledged. Got a complaint about a missing sign, Cooper said, getting directly to the point. County Road. Maintenance reported it this morning. Wouldn't know anything about that, would you? No idea, Jack replied smoothly. Cooper sighed. Look, I understand the impulse, but you need to work within the system here. The system that's allowed Caldwell to terrorize farmers for over a year? Emma asked sharply. I'm doing what I can. With limited resources, Cooper defended, but taking matters into your own hands will only make things worse. He looked pointedly at Jack. And I noticed you've got visitors, friends from the military. Old buddies catching up, Jack confirmed. Face neutral, Cooper wasn't convinced. Reed, I need your word you're not planning anything that's going to cause problems in my jurisdiction. I'm just protecting my father's property, Sheriff. Nothing more. See that it stays that way. Cooper turned to leave, then paused. By the way, Caldwell's holding some fancy fundraiser tonight. County commissioners, state representatives, all the influential folks in the area will be there, in case you were wondering why his security might be lighter today. The deliberate tip-off wasn't lost on Jack. Cooper was playing a careful game, maintaining official neutrality while providing useful information. Appreciate the update, Sheriff. After Cooper left, Emma turned to Jack. He's trying to help in his own way. I know. I should go check on my clinic, she said. Make sure there's no new damage. Jack nodded. We'll set up security here. Get your number into our communication system. Is that really necessary? Yes, he said simply. They've targeted you directly now. Emma studied him, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but remember this is still Pine Creek, not whatever war zone you just came from. There are rules here. There are rules everywhere, Jack replied. The difference is knowing which ones matter. After Emma left, Jack rejoined his team inside. William had fallen asleep in his chair, exhaustion from the morning's activities catching up with him. Sheriff's gone, Jack reported. Gave us some useful intel. Caldwell's hosting a fundraiser tonight. Security will be focused there. Perfect timing, Chen said, already pulling up satellite images of Caldwell's office complex. We can place surveillance equipment while they're distracted. Rodriguez checked the gear he'd brought. Basic package, directional microphones, cellular interceptors, motion triggers, non-invasive, hard to detect. Legal, Jack asked. Rodriguez and Chen exchanged glances. Technically, Chen hedged, in a national security context. This isn't a sanctioned operation, Jack reminded them. We're private citizens, with specialized skills, Rodriguez countered. Look, boss, we're not breaking and entering, just establishing surveillance on someone who's already demonstrated hostile intent. Jack considered the options. Emma's warning about escalation wasn't without merit, but neither was sitting passive while Caldwell plotted his next move. Reconnaissance only, he decided. We need information before we can develop a proper strategy. I can have a passive surveillance network. Running by nightfall, Chen promised. Nothing traceable back to us. William stirred in his chair, opening his eyes to find his kitchen transformed into a tactical operations center. Far from being disturbed, he seemed almost energized by the activity. "Reminds me of the command post during Korea," he said, surprising. "Jack?" William rarely spoke of his own military service. "You never talk about that," Jack noted, helping his father to a more comfortable position. "Never had much reason to," William replied. "Different kind of war, different kind of soldier." He studied the three men with knowing eyes. "But I recognize the look. You boys are the ones they send when nobody's supposed to know you were ever there." Jack didn't confirm or deny, but William nodded as if he'd received his answer. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. "Not of the fighting, of you coming home when it mattered." The simple statement caught Jack off guard. He busied himself reviewing Chen's surveillance plan, but his father's words lingered. By mid-afternoon, their security system was in place. Motion sensors at key access points, cameras covering vulnerable approaches, all feeding into Chen's encrypted monitoring system. Anyone approaching the farm would trigger silent alerts. "To their secure phones. Phase 1 complete," Rodriguez reported. "Farm perimeter secure." "Now for Phase 2, Chen added. "External reconnaissance." As dusk approached, they prepared for their first active measure against Caldwell, information gathering that would give them the advantage in whatever confrontation came next. Jack knew that in any conflict, superior intelligence often determined the outcome before the first shot was fired. His satellite phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Clinic secured. New locks installed. Need to talk." "Important information about Caldwell," Jack replied. "Farm secure. Team in place. Come at 2100 hours." Whatever Emma had discovered, it would factor into their developing strategy. The first pieces were moving into position in a game Caldwell didn't yet realize he was playing, one where Jack and his team were writing the rules. Moonlight silvered Caldwell's glass-walled headquarters as Jack and Rodriguez approached silently from the tree line. Chen guided them through security camera blind spots via their earpieces. "Security patrol approaching from the west," Chen warned. 20 seconds. They froze, becoming part of the landscape as a guard passed yards away, attention divided between his flashlight and phone. This reconnaissance mission was simple. Place surveillance devices around Caldwell's compound, while security was minimal due to the fundraiser across town. "Primary target is his office on the second floor," Chen instructed. "Secondary targets are the server room and conference area." Rodriguez bypassed the electronic lock at the rear entrance with practiced efficiency. Inside, they moved deliberately, through service corridors, avoiding motion sensors. In the server room, Rodriguez placed a tiny monitoring device while Jack kept watch. "Harvesting credentials now," Chen confirmed in their earpieces. Caldwell's corner office revealed an opulent space with expensive furniture and modern art. Jack found a locked credenza containing detailed files. "Files here," Jack reported, photographing documents with a specialized device that transmitted images directly to Chen. Land acquisition plans, water rights applications, investor presentations. One folder labeled "Read Property" contained construction plans for luxury homes on his father's farm. "They've already designed homes for your father's property," Chen said. Caldwell's advertising pre-sales to investors. The conference room yielded more, maps of the valley with properties marked. Already acquired properties were green, targeted ones red. The Reed farm was circled in gold with notes indicating priority acquisition, critical water access. Movement at the main entrance, Chen suddenly warned. Security's returning early. They exited through the loading dock, guided by Chen's real-time surveillance. 20 minutes later, they regrouped at their vehicle. Back at the farm, Chen analyzed the incoming data. Caldwell's entire operation is here. Investor lists, payment records, project timelines. And he's claiming historical usage rights to silver. Greek, all of it. That's impossible, Jack said. Our families had water rights for generations. He's challenging the historical record, claiming the creek ran through property his company now owns before being diverted in the 1950s. Without water rights, the farms are worthless, Jack realized. He's attacking on multiple fronts, Emma arrived looking troubled. I've been through county records. There's a pattern. Environmental violations, safety incidents, permit irregularities, all buried or dismissed. 3 people who opposed his projects had accidents, she continued. Car crash, house fire, farming incident. All ruled accidental, all shortly after they spoke against Caldwell. The state water inspector handling Caldwell's application. His daughter suddenly got a full scholarship from the Caldwell Foundation for rural education. Tom Miller said Caldwell's men visited him this morning, Emma added. Said if he doesn't sell by week's end, they can't guarantee his family's safety. Caldwell's over-leveraged, Chen explained. He's promised investors the water rights are secured. If he doesn't deliver, he loses everything. We move to phase 2. Jack decided. Controlled escalation to disrupt his operation and buy time. Movement at the perimeter, Chen suddenly announced. 3 vehicles approaching. Security monitors showed black SUVs moving toward the farm. Caldwell security. 9 men armed. Jack and Rodriguez took defensive positions as the vehicles stopped at the front gate. Deacon and his men emerged carrying flashlights and what appeared to be baseball bats. Reed, we know you're in there. Mr. Caldwell wants a word about trespassing. On private property, Jack stepped onto the porch. You're the ones trespassing, Deacon. The men spread out to surround the house. Last warning, Jack said clearly. Return to your vehicles and leave. Deacon laughed. There's 9 of us, tough guy. What exactly do you think? His words cut off as he triggered the first countermeasure, motion-activated sprinklers that Rodriguez had modified. Simultaneously, powerful floodlights activated, temporarily blinding the intruders. Automated security system, Jack explained calmly, holding up his phone to record. Sheriff Cooper will get a copy of this. I'm sure he'll be interested in armed men trespassing at night. The security team retreated, shouting threats as they departed. Later, Emma confronted Jack. That was clever with the sprinklers, but Caldwell won't stop because his men got wet. We're not stopping either, Jack assured her. Tonight was just a demonstration, letting them know the rules have changed. As dawn approached, Jack watched the eastern sky lighten over the land his family had worked for generations. For the first time since returning, he felt a connection to this place, a sense that protecting it was protecting something essential. About his own identity. Caldwell had no idea what he had awakened, but he would learn. Tom Miller met Jack on the porch of his weathered farmhouse, a shotgun casually resting in the crook of his arm. Reed's boy, heard you were making waves. Mr. Miller, Emma mentioned you had visitors yesterday. Caldwell's thugs got specific about what might happen to my family if I don't sell. Inside, Miller's wife Martha poured coffee while their grandson Tyler watched Jack with curiosity. My dad says you're in the army and kill people. Special forces, Jack corrected mildly. We try not to kill people when we don't have to. Miller leaned forward once the boy left. What are we dealing with here? These aren't normal developers. Caldwell's operation is sophisticated. Legal pressure, political connections, intimidation. We need to coordinate our defense, Jack explained, outlining a network of neighboring farmers, implementing security measures, and sharing intelligence. Jack's phone buzzed with a message from Chen. Caldwell's men mobilizing. Within minutes, 3 black SUVs appeared. 6 neighboring farmers had already arrived in their trucks, creating a show of community solidarity. "Quite a gathering," Deacon called out when he arrived with his men. "Neighborly visit," Miller replied. "Folks around here look out for each other." Sheriff Cooper's arrival interrupted the standoff. "Unless you have official business here, I suggest you move along. Lots of witnesses today." After Caldwell's men departed, Cooper pulled Jack aside. "Caldwell called the county commissioner this morning. There's talk of budget reviews." "Find us evidence we can use," Jack pressed. "Working on it," Cooper replied cryptically. By mid-afternoon, a rural defense network was established. Back at the Reed farm, Chen showed Jack footage of Caldwell having an angry emergency meeting. "Caldwell's bringing in new men," Emma reported later. "Professionals from out of state with special skills." William straightened in his chair. "Then it's time you knew everything." He had Emma retrieve a metal lockbox containing old documents, property surveys, water rights certifications, legal correspondence. "Original survey from 1897, he explained, showing Jack yellowed papers, "proves Silver Creek always ran through our land." He extracted another document dated 1976. "This is a geological survey commissioned by Westland Mining Corporation." Jack scanned it. "It shows significant mineral deposits under our property." "And under neighboring farms," William confirmed. "This isn't just about water rights or a resort. There's copper worth millions down there. So the resort is partially a cover," Jack realized. "The real value is mineral rights." Chen's surveillance alert activated, showing a convoy approaching. 3 black SUVs plus 2 heavy-duty trucks carrying construction equipment. "They're going to claim the county easement gives them right-of-way," Jack predicted. "Something that sounds legitimate but gets them onto our property." Chen received a message from his contact. Caldwell just filed for an emergency excavation permit, claiming a water main leak, threatening contamination. "There's no water main anywhere near that area," William insisted. Jack made his decision. "Chen, seek an emergency injunction. Emma, call our supporters. We need witnesses documenting everything. Rodriguez, prepare non-violent countermeasures." "And you?" William asked. "I'm going to have a chat with Caldwell," Jack replied. It's time he understood who he's dealing with. Jack arrived unannounced at Preston Caldwell's office, bypassing security with quiet authority. The developer was older than Jack expected, around 60, with silver hair and a weathered complexion. "Your men are setting up construction equipment at my father's farm," Jack stated, "based on a fabricated water main emergency. The county infrastructure is aging. Better to address potential problems proactively." "There is no water main at that location," Caldwell sighed. "Your father has been unreasonable. My offer is 3 times market value for land that's barely producing income." "It's not about money." "It's always about money, Mr. Reed." Jack remained expressionless. "I know about the copper deposits." Caldwell's eyes widened briefly before he recovered. "Yes, there's potential mining value. All the more reason the property is worth more in development. Not when you factor in the environmental impact. Mining would contaminate Silver Creek, affecting every farm downstream. Modern extraction methods are much cleaner than you think," Caldwell countered. "Let's be direct. You've caused quite a disruption to my operations. The situation could become unpleasant. It became unpleasant when your men burned my father's crops, when they threatened the millers, when they vandalized Emma Sullivan's clinic. Regrettable incidents. Overzealous employees acting without authorization. Now, you're bringing in professionals from out of state, men with special skills. Business security is a serious matter." Jack's expression remained unreadable. "Let me be equally direct. The harassment stops now, or there will be consequences." Caldwell laughed. "Consequences? I have the county, commissioners, half the state legislature, and federal contacts. What exactly do you think you can do?" Before I came here, I made 3 calls, Jack said quietly, to the EPA about watershed contamination, to the Bureau of Land Management regarding historical preservation status, and to my former commanding officer about irregular financial transactions between your company and offshore accounts. Bluffing doesn't suit you, soldier. The phone rang. Caldwell answered, his expression darkening. It seems federal agents just arrived at the county records office with a warrant for documents related to my water rights applications. I believe in being thorough, Jack replied. Caldwell stood slowly. You've made a serious miscalculation, Reed. You've never faced someone like me. I'm giving you one opportunity to withdraw gracefully. Or what? Or I'll dismantle your operation piece by piece. Caldwell moved to the window. This isn't a battlefield with clear enemies. It's business, politics, law, realms where I've operated successfully for decades. Every conflict has rules. You broke them when you targeted my family. You should know, Caldwell finally said, that Sheriff Cooper works for me. Not officially, of course, but practically. Your community defense network operates only because I've allowed it so far. Jack absorbed this without visible reaction. Cooper warned me about your construction equipment arriving today. A calculated move to build your trust. He reports everything to me. This changes nothing, Jack said. It changes everything. Your father's property will be mine. The equipment at my father's farm. Remove it by sundown. Or what? Caldwell repeated, reaching for his phone. Test me and find out. Outside, Jack called Chen. Cooper's compromised, working with Caldwell. Get me proof. At the farm, the situation had escalated. Equipment operators had begun clearing ground at the property line while Cooper stood by, allowing the encroachment. Cooper's saying his hands are tied, Emma explained. The county emergency declaration overrides property rights temporarily. It's all for show, Jack told her quietly. Cooper's working for Caldwell. Emma looked shocked. That's not possible. Cooper grew up here. Caldwell just confirmed it. Chen soon messaged confirmation. Found monthly payments from Caldwell, shell company to offshore account linked to Cooper, going back 2 years. As they processed this betrayal, a black sedan with government plates arrived. An FBI agent emerged, spoke briefly with Cooper, then ordered the construction crew to stop work. Jack's phone rang. Special Agent Wilson from the FBI. We've been investigating Mr. Caldwell for financial improprieties. Your information accelerated certain aspects of our investigation. The construction equipment. Being removed as we speak. The emergency declaration has been suspended pending review. Does this mean it's over? William asked hopefully as the equipment was packed up. No, Jack said honestly. Caldwell just lost his legal leverage. But men like him have contingency plans. He'll escalate now, move to more direct methods. The professionals he brought in, Emma realized. Exactly. The real fight is just beginning. FBI Special Agent Wilson reviewed the documents Jack had provided at the Reed kitchen table. This adds significant context to our existing investigation. What exactly are you investigating Caldwell for? Emma asked. I can't discuss specifics, but it involves potential money laundering and tax evasion. Not the threats, vandalism, or arson, William asked sharply. Those would typically be local matters unless they cross state lines. Jack understood the limitations. If Cooper is compromised, these local matters won't be properly investigated. We're looking into the financial connections between Sheriff Cooper and Caldwell, Wilson assured them. Meanwhile, we've placed surveillance on Caldwell's operation. We're aware he's brought in former military contractors with histories of excessive force. How long before you can move on, Caldwell? Emma asked. Financial investigations take time. Realistically, weeks, possibly months. We don't have months, William stated flatly. Harvest season's approaching. Caldwell knows that's when we're most vulnerable. After Wilson left, Jack's team assessed their position. Caldwell will accelerate his timeline now, Jack said. The FBI presence forces his hand. Chen looked up from his laptop. Surveillance shows increased activity at Caldwell headquarters. I've intercepted communications suggesting they're planning something for tonight. Multiple teams, multiple targets, Chen explained. References to the Creek access point and the Eastern property. The water monitoring station on Miller's property, Emma realized. And our property from the east, where the copper deposits are richest. Two-pronged attack to divide our response, Rodriguez confirmed. They mobilized quickly. Jack had Miller's farm alerted, while Rodriguez set up additional sensors along their eastern perimeter. William refused to leave the farm, despite Jack's concerns. Reeds don't abandon their land when trouble comes. At least stay in the reinforced cellar we prepared, Jack compromised. As darkness fell, Chen reported movement detected on the access road to Miller's farm. 3 vehicles, headlights off. They're starting with the monitoring station, Jack concluded, probably hoping to draw our attention there while positioning for the main assault here. Jack took position overlooking the creek junction, while Rodriguez watched the eastern boundary. Soon, Rodriguez reported 2 vehicles at the East Ridge Fire Road. 8 personnel, military formation, moving tactically, more disciplined than before. At Miller's farm, Caldwell's team triggered perimeter alarms. Sheriff Cooper arrived with suspicious timing. Jack moved silently to investigate the eastern team. Through night vision, he observed professionals setting up survey equipment at the property boundary. They established a line cutting 20 yards into Reed property, then used ground-penetrating radar along the newly marked line. Getting good readings, a technician reported. Density consistent with survey expectations. Definitely extends beyond the current boundary. Jack understood. They were gathering evidence for a boundary dispute claim, potentially giving Caldwell grounds for mining access under regulatory provisions. They're setting up for a boundary dispute claim, Jack told Chen, using radar to map mineral deposits beyond our property line. Mining regulations allow for subterranean resource access that crosses property lines under certain conditions, Chen explained. Jack decided to act. I'm going to disrupt their operation. Non-confrontational, just equipment issues. With Special Forces stealth, Jack circled behind their vehicles, creating time-delayed mechanical failures that would appear as equipment malfunctions. He then modified their portable generator's fuel line to fail after specific runtime. Meanwhile, the situation at Miller's escalated, with Cooper detaining witnesses. Jack directed Emma to take their recorded evidence to Miller's location. As Caldwell's survey team finished and departed, their vehicles suddenly failed halfway back to the main road, their collected data compromised. Cooper tried to confiscate Miller's recordings, Emma reported later, but I arrived with our evidence. FBI agent Wilson showed up too. Cooper backed down. They'll be back, Jack told Rodriguez as they watched Caldwell's team walking back to the main road, with different tactics. We'll be ready, Rodriguez assured him. But Jack knew the real. Confrontation was still coming. Tonight had merely set the stage. Dawn revealed the aftermath of the previous night's confrontation. Tire tracks at the eastern boundary, abandoned survey stakes, and signs of tampering at Miller's water monitoring station. Both properties remained secure, but Caldwell's teams had retreated without their data. Jack called Colonel Winters from the ridge overlooking the farm. Caldwell's bringing in professional operators. Cooper's compromised. FBI's involved but moving too slowly. What are you asking for, Reed? Intelligence. Anything on Caldwell's new personnel, his mining interests, how deep his corruption runs. Information will be coming within 24 hours. Remember your still active duty. Whatever you do reflects on the uniform. In the farmhouse, Emma reported that neighboring farmers were implementing security measures based on Jack's recommendations. Chen's equipment chimed an alert. Caldwell's filing for an emergency hearing with the county commissioners, Chen reported, claiming his survey team discovered hazardous geological conditions requiring immediate action. Hearings tomorrow morning. Creating a pretext for official access, Jack analyzed. We need to be at that hearing, William insisted. We will be, Jack assured him. But Caldwell wouldn't file unless he was confident of the outcome. We need to shift focus, target his operation more directly. Jack spread a map of Caldwell's holdings. His operation depends on political cover and investor confidence. If we disrupt either, his position weakens. My analysis shows he's highly leveraged, Chen noted. Major loan payments coming due next month. And his promotional materials don't mention the environmental complications or FBI investigation, Emma added. That's securities fraud. Jack focused on the Investor Relations Center at Caldwell's headquarters. If we can access his investor presentations, promises, projections, we could provide them to the FBI, Chen finished. Accelerate their investigation. Sheriff Cooper's arrival interrupted their planning. Read. Need a word. Anything you have to say can be heard by everyone. I'm here about the county hearing tomorrow. Caldwell's geological claims are fabricated, but the commissioners won't care. They've already decided to grant emergency access. Why are you telling us this? Jack asked. Because this has gone too far. Burning crops, threatening families, that wasn't what I signed up for. But taking Caldwell's money was? It started small, Cooper admitted. Before I knew it, I was in too deep. So now you want redemption? I want to make things right. Caldwell's planning something big. Those contractors, some have demolitions experience. After Cooper left, the team debated his information. Could be legitimate remorse or a sophisticated ploy, Chen suggested. Either way, we verify everything, Jack decided. But if he's telling the truth about demolitions experts, Caldwell could be planning to damage the properties himself, Rodriguez concluded. Create an environmental emergency that forces evacuation. By evening, Chen confirmed Cooper's claims. The hearing is scheduled. No public comment period. The decision document is already drafted. Full emergency access granted to Caldwell. And I found something else. Caldwell ordered blasting caps, detonation cord, and commercial-grade explosives 3 days ago, listed for mining exploration purposes. Caldwell is planning to damage the properties once he has legal cover, Jack decided. Tomorrow, after the hearing, Emma concluded. William spoke up. Never imagined we were sitting on something that would make a man willing to destroy the land to get at what's beneath. Jack surveyed the team. We have one advantage. Caldwell doesn't know that we know his real plan. So we prepare for what comes after, Rodriguez nodded. Chen, continue monitoring communications. Rodriguez, identify likely locations for explosive. Placement. Emma, coordinate with the network. Everyone needs to document everything while staying safe. And me? William asked. You need to appear at the hearing tomorrow. Make a public statement. Create witnesses to your presence there. A distraction, William understood. Keep their attention on me while you deal with the real threat. For the first time since Jack's return, he saw genuine pride in his father's eyes. Never thought all those years of military training would end up protecting this old farm. Jack stepped outside alone, watching the farmhouse silhouetted against the darkening sky. This mission struck deeper than any he'd undertaken before. This wasn't about national security or strategic objectives. This was about family, community, and a way of life worth preserving. Caldwell had miscalculated. He thought he was facing a farmer's son with military training. He didn't understand that he was actually facing one of the most effective special operations commanders in recent military history. A man who had spent his career identifying enemy vulnerabilities and exploiting them with precision. and Jack Reed never lost when the stakes mattered. William Reed straightened his tie as Emma helped him from her truck at the county administration building. Despite his improving health, today's effort clearly taxed him. "Remember," Jack said, "your job is just to be visible. Make a statement." "For the record," William nodded, "I know a rigged game when I see one. FBI agent Wilson met them at the entrance, just here to observe the proceedings." Inside, Caldwell and his entourage projected confidence. Sheriff Cooper stood by the door, avoiding eye contact with everyone. "This special emergency session will come to order," announced Commissioner Harris. "We're addressing the petition from Caldwell Development regarding geological hazards at specific properties." Caldwell's geologist presented evidence of unstable subterranean conditions requiring urgent assessment and mitigation. "That's complete nonsense," William whispered. "Our land's been stable for generations." "Not about truth," Jack reminded him. "About creating a record to justify their next moves." When allowed a brief statement, William approached the podium with dignity. "I've worked that land for 60 years. We've never encountered any geological hazards. What Mr. Caldwell calls a hazard is actually copper deposits that his company wants to extract regardless of environmental consequences. We must rely on expert testimony." Harris dismissed him. The commissioners quickly granted Caldwell emergency access, effective immediately. "Phase 1 complete," Jack murmured into his concealed communication device. Proceeding to Phase 2. Outside, Jack instructed Emma to take William to her clinic. "Everything's proceeding as planned." Jack contacted Chen. "Status?" "Multiple Caldwell vehicles mobilizing, 4 heading toward Reed property, 2 toward Miller's." "Rodriguez?" "In position at the eastern ridge. Clear sightlines on both approach roads." Jack drove to Miller's property, where Tom was already plowing the field adjacent to the water monitoring station, making access difficult. 2 neighboring farmers stood nearby, cleaning their rifles. "Caldwell's men are 15 minutes. Out," Jack informed Miller. "Remember, just document and notify." Agent Wilson confirmed. "FBI surveillance shows explosive materials being transported. Intervention team on standby." "First vehicles approaching Reed Farm," Rodriguez reported. "Team of 6, including 2 carrying demolition gear." "They're moving. Faster than expected," Rodriguez added urgently, "already placing charges at the creek junction." "Move on the farm team," Jack decided. "I'll handle the team here." Jack approached the creek monitoring station, where 3 men were placing explosives around the water control mechanisms. He activated his first countermeasure, a constructed failure that sprayed high-pressure water across the work area. Rodriguez reported, "Farm team intercepted, 2 in custody, 4 retreated, FBI on site." Jack then signaled Miller and his neighbors to approach openly with cameras, creating witnesses that complicated the security team's illegal activity. They quickly retreated, but left behind an explosive device. Agent Wilson called, "Reed, we've got Caldwell's team at your farm. Caught them red-handed placing explosives. We're moving on Caldwell now." At Emma's clinic, Jack found William pacing anxiously. "It's over," Jack confirmed. "FBI caught Caldwell's teams attempting to place explosives on both properties. They're taking Caldwell into custody." William sank into a chair. "They were really going to blow up part of our land? For copper? And to create an environmental emergency they could exploit," Jack explained. "But it backfired. You set them up," Emma realized. "Used the hearing as bait." Jack nodded. "Caldwell's predictable. He escalates when challenged." William shook his head in wonder. "All these years, I thought your military career was taking you away from something important. Never realized it was preparing you for something more important." "Agent," Wilson messaged, "Caldwell in custody. Search of his office already yielding evidence of additional crimes." As they drove back to the farm, Jack felt a sense of peace. The skills that had made him an elite soldier had served a different purpose. Here but one no less worthy. FBI agents methodically processed evidence around the Reed farm, documenting each explosive device Caldwell's team had attempted to place. They were strategic, Jack explained to Agent Wilson, designing failure points that would contaminate the creek while appearing natural. Professional work, Wilson nodded. These aren't amateurs. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 3 black SUVs. Officials from the Department of Interior and EPA emerged. After a tense discussion with the new arrivals, Wilson returned to Jack. Situations evolved. The copper deposits extend further than documented. Department of Interior is claiming federal interest due to potential impact on protected watersheds. So one threat is replaced by another, Jack concluded. Various interests within the government have different priorities, Wilson admitted. Some focus on prosecution, others on resource management. When Emma arrived with William, Jack explained, "The new development. So we beat Caldwell just to face the federal government instead?" William asked bitterly. "Different situation," Jack assured him. "This will proceed through proper regulatory channels, with public hearings, environmental impact studies. Legal protections didn't stop Caldwell from nearly blowing up our creek," William pointed out. Chen had received intelligence from Colonel Winters about the interior officials. The lead official, Harris, previously worked for a mining consortium. Potential conflict of interest. Director Catherine Harris introduced herself to William. "We need to discuss the regulatory implications of today's events and the mineral deposits on your property." "My land isn't subject to your regulations," William insisted. "Silver Creek water rights have been in my family for generations. Federal law supersedes local water rights when significant mineral deposits impact multi-state watersheds," Harris countered. She outlined a complex federal response: environmental studies, mineral surveys, water quality monitoring, to determine how the copper deposits should be managed in the national interest. "And if we oppose these studies?" William asked. "They're non-negotiable under federal statute." Jack called Colonel Winters, who provided context. "Harris is considered a moderate, believes in regulated extraction with environmental safeguards, better than alternatives in the current administration." When Jack rejoined the discussion, he pressed Harris, "What assurances can you provide that this process won't simply replace Caldwell with a government-sanctioned alternative?" "I can commit to transparency, community involvement, and adherence to environmental protection standards." "We'll need more than standard commitments," Jack insisted. "A formal community oversight committee with actual authority, local experts included in all evaluations, public disclosure of all findings." After hours of negotiation, they reached an agreement. Federal assessment would proceed with significant local involvement. No extraction decisions would be made without community input and comprehensive environmental impact analysis. As Harris departed, William sighed, "Just trading one battle for another." "But on better terms," Jack pointed out, "with legal protections and public accountability." Later, sitting on the porch, watching darkness settle over their land, William said quietly, "Your mother would be proud. Not just of saving the farm, but how you brought people together to do it." Jack allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had faced a determined enemy with overwhelming resources and prevailed. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them from a position of strength. Not just tactical or legal strength, but the deeper strength that comes from defending something worthy with honor. 3 months later, autumn had transformed the Silver Creek Valley. The scorched wheat field had been tilled under, prepared for next spring's planting. Morning frost crystallized on fence posts and barn roofs. Jack stood near his mother's grave, coffee warming his hands against the chill. From this ridge, he could see the entire valley, the farms, the creek, and the town slowly awakening. William approached, his health much improved. "Thought I'd find you here. You come every morning." "Paying respects," Jack replied simply. "Should have done it years ago." "News came yesterday," William said. Caldwell took the plea deal. 15 years, forfeiture of assets. Cooper got 5 years, reduced for his cooperation. "He made bad choices," Jack acknowledged, "but he came through when it mattered." The community had begun healing. The farming network Jack organized had evolved from defense to mutual support. Federal assessment of the copper deposits continued under the negotiated framework, with Emma chairing the oversight committee. "Rodriguez and Chen heading out today?" William asked. "This afternoon. Military duties called them back." Inside the farmhouse, Emma reviewed documents at the kitchen table while Rodriguez and Chen packed. "Latest environmental impact study," she explained. "Preliminary findings suggest the copper can be accessed with minimal disruption if properly managed." "If properly managed," William emphasized skeptically. "That's why the oversight committee matters," Emma reminded him. After breakfast came the inevitable departures. The men exchanged few words. Their bond required little verbal expression. "You know where to find us if needed," Rodriguez said. "Same goes for you," Jack replied. As their vehicle disappeared, Emma stood beside Jack. "Will you miss it? That life, that purpose?" "Parts of it. The clarity, the brotherhood, but there's purpose here too, just different." "The Community Development Committee wants your input on the new agricultural cooperative," Emma mentioned. "Your leave ends in 2 weeks." "I'm not going anywhere," Jack said simply. William joined them. "Don't stay on my account, son." "Not staying out of obligation," Jack clarified. "There's work worth doing here. What we built these past months, it matters." "What about your military career?" William asked. "Colonel Winters suggested a transfer to the National Guard in Helena," Jack replied. "Part-time commitment leaves me time for the farm and community work." "Your mother would approve," William said. "She always said you had her spirit and my stubbornness." "Effective combination," Emma amended with a smile. In the distance, Miller's tractor rumbled across his fields. Other farms showed similar activity, agricultural life continuing despite recent turbulence. The community had been tested and emerged stronger. Jack thought of his mother's letter about protecting what matters. He'd discovered it meant more than defending physical land. It meant protecting connections, community, a way of life worth preserving. "We should get to work," he said. "Winter comes quickly in the mountains." As Jack completed his security rounds, he paused at the edge of the tilled field. Next spring, new growth would erase the last visible scars of Caldwell's attack. Looking back at the farmhouse where his father worked and at Emma's truck in the yard, Jack recognized that he had found something he hadn't realized he was seeking. Not just reconciliation with his past, but a future worth building. Jack Reed had come home to protect a farm and found a community worth fighting for. And for the first time since returning to Montana, he felt certain he was exactly where he needed to be. Emma Sullivan had always prided herself on practical competence. As Pine Creek's veterinarian, she'd built a life around solving problems, healing what could be healed, and accepting what couldn't. Her clinic served the community's animals while her volunteer work with the Environmental Committee addressed larger concerns. It was a good life, purposeful if sometimes lonely. Then Jack Reed had returned, and everything changed. She remembered him from high school, the restless, somewhat reckless farm boy who'd kissed her behind the gymnasium before enlisting and disappearing from Pine Creek. That boy was gone, replaced by a man whose quiet intensity and precise movements spoke of experiences she could barely imagine. Initially, she'd resented his sudden reappearance. For months, she'd been helping William manage his declining health and struggling farm, while Jack remained absent. Her resentment had only deepened when his confrontation with Caldwell's men seemed to escalate the danger rather than resolve it. But watching him organize the community's defense had changed her perspective. Jack operated with a strategic vision. that transformed individual vulnerability into collective strength. He never sought credit, never grandstanded, simply assessed problems and implemented solutions with remarkable effectiveness. During the night of Caldwell's attempted sabotage, Emma had witnessed firsthand the military side of Jack that had always been abstract to her. The calm precision of his coordination, the contingency planning, the absolute focus, these weren't just skills, but a fundamental approach to life that both impressed and unsettled her. "How do you compartmentalize like that?" she'd asked him afterward. "Switch between combat mode and civilian life?" "They're not as different as people think," he'd replied. "Both require clarity about what matters and what doesn't. What matters." Those words had resonated with Emma. In her veterinary practice, she made similar calculations daily: triage, priorities, resource allocation. Perhaps they weren't so different. After all, as autumn settled over the valley, Emma found herself dividing her time between her clinic, the oversight committee work, and increasingly frequent visits to the Reed farm. The friendship developing between her and Jack was unexpected but felt natural. Two practical people finding common ground in service to something larger than themselves. Now, reviewing environmental impact documents at her kitchen table late at night, Emma considered the changes in the community. Caldwell's defeat had catalyzed something powerful. Neighbors reconnecting, farms cooperating, a renewed appreciation for their shared heritage and environment. And personally, Emma smiled slightly, remembering Jack's quiet certainty when he'd told her he wasn't leaving. She wasn't ready to name the feeling that statement had evoked, but recognized its significance. Some problems couldn't be solved with the clinical detachment she typically favored. The veterinarian in her had always understood that healing takes time, whether for animals or land. The woman in her was beginning to understand that the same principle applied to people and communities. Emma closed the environmental report and made notes for tomorrow's committee meeting. Outside her window, the Montana stars shone with remarkable clarity. Whatever came next, she was committed to this valley, these people, and the future they were building together. Some things were worth fighting for. That much, at least, she and Jack Reed completely agreed upon. Miguel Rodriguez guided their vehicle along the mountain highway, Montana's vast landscape gradually giving way to more populated areas as they headed toward the airport. Beside him, David Chen monitored their secure communications one final. "And time before shutdown. Reed's perimeter security is fully operational," Chen confirmed, closing his laptop. "Automated alerts will forward to his phone and the new sheriff's office simultaneously." Rodriguez nodded, his focus on the road, but his thoughts still back at the Reed farm. "Think he'll stay?" "Permanently, I mean." 97% probability, Chen replied with his characteristic precision. His behavior patterns show increasing integration with the community structure. And plus, the way he looks at the veterinarian, Emma, Rodriguez grinned. "Yeah, noticed that too." The two men fell into comfortable silence, the kind that develops between operators who have faced combat together. Their team had always functioned with remarkable cohesion, each man bringing specialized skills, but united by absolute trust in one another. Jack Reed had been the linchpin, the strategist who integrated their capabilities into something greater than the sum of its parts. "Different kind of mission," Rodriguez observed finally, "protecting American soil directly instead of operating overseas." "Same principles, though," Chen replied. "Intelligence gathering, threat assessment, coordinated response." "Civilians complicated in things," Rodriguez noted. "So many variables, so many people to protect." Reed handled it well, adapted standard protocols for civilian application. Rodriguez thought about the community network Jack had established. Farmers with radios and cameras, coordinated response plans, information sharing protocols. not unlike the local defense forces they'd helped train in various global hotspots, but with American families rather than foreign allies. Think the colonel will approve his transfer to the National Guard? Chen nodded. Already in process, according to my sources. Reed's experience is too valuable to lose entirely. Part-time arrangement preserves his capabilities for essential operations, while allowing him to establish civilian functionality. Rodriguez chuckled at Chen's formal assessment. In other words, Jack gets to have a life while still serving. Affirmative. As they approached the airport, where they would separate for their respective destinations, Rodriguez felt the familiar mix of emotions that came with the end of a mission. Satisfaction in objectives achieved, adjustment to the transition, mental preparation for the next assignment. "We did good work here," he said simply. "Indeed," Chen agreed. "Protected the objective, neutralized the threat, preserved civilian infrastructure." But both men knew it had been more than that. They'd helped their commander, their friend, reconcile with his past and secure his future. In their line of work, where outcomes were often classified and appreciation rarely expressed, that represented a unique kind of victory. "Reed knows we're available if needed," Rodriguez added, as they pulled into the airport parking area. Chen nodded, the unspoken bond of their unit requiring no elaborate affirmation. Wherever their separate duties took them next, they remained connected by experiences few others could comprehend. Special operators adapted, overcame, and moved forward. Their mission in Montana was complete. Others would follow, but this one, they both silently acknowledged, would remain special, the mission that helped one of their own find his way home. Preston Caldwell had always considered himself a visionary. In the sterile federal interview room, that self-image was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. "Let's review the sequence again, Mr. Caldwell," Agent Wilson said, his tone neutral, but relentless. "You authorized the procurement of commercial explosives for use on private property without permits, environmental assessment, or landowner permission." "My team exceeded their instructions," Caldwell insisted for the dozenth time. "I wanted geological assessment, not destructive intervention." Wilson simply slid another document across the table. "Your direct communications with the team leader indicate otherwise. Quote, create conditions that necessitate emergency measures. Creek contamination provides strongest regulatory leverage." Caldwell's attorney shifted uncomfortably beside him. The evidence against his client was overwhelming and growing daily. Each interview seemed to uncover new violations, financial irregularities, corrupt dealings with officials, environmental negligence, and ultimately conspiracy to commit destructive acts for financial gain. "My client is prepared to discuss cooperation parameters," the attorney interjected, "in exchange for consideration regarding sentencing recommendations." Wilson nodded, unsurprised. "The U.S. Attorney is willing to discuss terms, provided Mr. Caldwell's cooperation is complete and verifiable. That includes all financial records, all communications with corrupted officials, and full disclosure of similar operations in other jurisdictions." "Similar operations," Caldwell protested. This was an isolated situation. Wilson's expression didn't change as he opened another file. "Our financial analysis suggests otherwise. Development patterns in Wyoming, Idaho, and Oregon show remarkable similarities. Same approach, same shell company structures, same pressure tactics." For the first time, Caldwell felt real fear. The federal investigation had expanded far beyond what he'd anticipated. His carefully constructed empire, built through strategic acquisitions and political influence, was being systematically dismantled. The plea deal, when finally negotiated, was both better and worse than Caldwell had expected. 15 years rather than 30, Asset forfeiture limited to demonstrably illegal acquisitions, but full cooperation required, including testimony against former Sheriff Cooper and various officials who had facilitated his operations. In his holding cell that evening, Caldwell reflected on the miscalculations that had led to his downfall. He had underestimated the Reed farm's significance, dismissed William as just another stubborn old farmer, but his critical error had been failing to recognize what Jack Reed represented. Not just military training, but strategic thinking capable of outmaneuvering Caldwell's own carefully laid plans. The evening news played on the small television in the common area. Caldwell watched with detached interest as his own face appeared on screen, followed by footage of federal agents removing boxes from his offices. The reporter summarized the charges against him, then transitioned to positive coverage of the community that had stood against him. Farmers working together, environmental protections being established, plans for sustainable development of the region's resources. His vision for Silver Creek Valley was being replaced by something different, something he hadn't considered valuable. The irony wasn't lost on him. Preston Caldwell had always prided himself on seeing potential where others saw only obstacles. Now, facing the consequences of his actions, he was forced to acknowledge a different kind of vision, one based not on exploitation but on preservation, not on individual profit but on community welfare. It was a perspective he could finally recognize, even if far too late to matter. Spring returned to Silver Creek Valley in a riot of green, the land renewing itself as it had for countless generations. The wheat field that had been scorched the previous summer now sprouted tender shoots, promising a bountiful harvest. Along the creek banks, willows unfurled delicate leaves, and wildflowers dotted the meadows with splashes of color. At the Reed farm, preparations for the growing season were in full swing. William supervised from the porch, his health stronger. Though he now used a cane for longer walks, his guidance remained invaluable, his knowledge of the land and its rhythms, a resource Jack relied upon daily. Jack himself had settled into a rhythm that balanced farm responsibilities with his part-time National Guard duties. The transfer to the training division in Helena had been approved, allowing him to share his expertise with new recruits while maintaining his connection to the land. The skills that had once been deployed in distant conflicts now served both military preparedness and agricultural sustainability. The community had transformed as well. The defense network established during the Caldwell crisis had evolved into a robust cooperative that shared equipment, coordinated planting and harvest schedules, and collectively marketed their products. Under Emma's leadership, they had secured organic certification for several farms, opening premium markets previously inaccessible to individual producers. The federal assessment of the copper deposits had concluded with a balanced approach, limited extraction permitted in non-sensitive areas, with strict environmental controls and significant community profit sharing required. The Oversight Committee, now permanently established, ensured compliance with all protective measures. Today, however, work had paused for celebration. Picnic tables dotted the yard beside the Reed farmhouse, laden with potluck dishes brought by neighbors and friends. Children played tag between the barn and the equipment shed, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. Emma arrived last, her clinic responsibilities completed for the day. She carried a large cake decorated with 1 year in blue frosting, marking not just a year since Caldwell's defeat, but the community's resilience and renewal. Jack met her halfway, taking the cake with one hand and briefly squeezing her fingers with the other. Their relationship had deepened gradually over the months, neither rushing what both recognized as significant. Miller says the irrigation improvements have increased his yield projections by 30%, Emma reported, the practical communication typical of their interaction. And the new sheriff wants to integrate our community alert system with the county emergency response protocols. Good developments, Jack nodded. Signs of progress. As they joined the gathering, conversations flowed around them. Farming techniques, weather predictions, children's achievements, and community plans. Rodriguez and Chen, visiting for the weekend, shared stories with William that carefully omitted classified details, but conveyed the camaraderie of their shared experiences. Looking across the assembly of neighbors who had stood together against forces that would have destroyed their way of life, Jack felt a deep satisfaction that transcended any military achievement. Here was something worth protecting, worth building, worth passing to future generations. The land endured. The community thrived. And Jack Reed had finally come home.